Welcome back to Homelands on CFCR 90.5 FM in Saskatoon, Homelands of the Métis and Treaty 6 territory. You can join us every second Saturday morning at 10 a.m. And you can also catch up on our YouTube channel or follow our Facebook page, Homelands, Saskatoon SK. Look for the picture of the Batoche Church in winter. And now back to our guest, Jonina Kirton. So welcome, Jonina.
Thank you. It's so great to be with you, Andrea. I love that Zoom like bridges that distance, eh? So here I am halfway across the country, and
Yeah.
it's like we're having tea together in the living room.
Yeah, it's lovely. It's really nice. It's so good to see your face. And for those of you just listening on radio, I guess you just get to hear our voices, but you can always catch up on the YouTube channel, and then you'll get to see both of us as well.
Yeah,
So, so I think in the second half, you are maybe going to share a little bit of poetry and some more stories. So I'm really looking forward to that.
yeah, I am. And I would go back to sharing a bit of slides. And again, I'll do my best to offer a brief explanation to people who are not able to see, um, who are listening rather than looking. So I have up right now this living root bridge, it's called, and I'll explain a little bit later where the relevance to the poem that I'm about to read. Um, this is a remarkable thing that's technology that's in India. They take the roots from each side of the water and blend them together and create this living root bridge. I highly recommend looking into it. It's fascinating. So as a person who's mixed, there's always this feeling of being a person of between. And so the bridge to me became this analogy for myself or a metaphor for myself. I feel like I'm the bridge between these two worlds. So one world's on one side, one's on the other, and I'm this bridge between the two. And so I really felt that way for a long, long time. And I think I know the answer to this question, but uh, I know. How do you feel about that, Andrea? About being, did you feel that you were a bridge between these two worlds and that you had a sense of responsibility to both sides?
Definitely, definitely. You feel that pull, that push and pull between, because there is that divide, there is that river in the middle kind of thing. And you just kind of I've heard lots of people of mixed ancestry kind of describe that way, that bridge between um, you know, others. And yeah, it's a really good metaphor. I like
Yeah,
the roots making up the bridge. That's really beautiful.
it's a remarkable technology. And, it just shows as well the indigenous wisdom. So they've been doing this for a long, long time, long before we were building steel and cement bridges. So I'm going to read a poem that's traveled all over the world, it seems like. Well, not quite, but it's gone far, this poem. It's called Reconciliation. It's called Reconciliation, as I said, and it's was written for an event that was called the Art of Reconciliation. So we were being asked to write about art from a reconciliation point of view. And so reconciliation. How will I reconcile myself, the Icelander and the Métis, the settler and the indigenous, an ally to myself, pardon me, an ally to myself since birth? I often felt between worlds, my body a suspension bridge flung across a chasm, weak anchors at each end. I wondered, am I to forever be the way across? My spine a flexible deck, and within cables too much tension as some tried to cross. We all swung wildly with no safety nets. The waves of emotion threatened us all. And then there were the times that both sides sought to disown me, to cut my cords, let me fall to the rushing waters below. And of course, I don't have the second half right handy. I'm gonna. Technical difficulties. Just give me 1 second. I've got all these papers and are out of order. So fall to the rushing waters below. Maybe one day I will just let go, float away, see where the water takes me. But not today. Today I will rebuild. This time no quick fixes, no steel cables or wood planks. No rust, no rot, no nails necessary, but rather the slow growth of twisted roots from ancient trees, the way across a path made also of grandfather and grandmother stones. I will become a self-sustaining structure, gain strength over time, a living root bridge that lasts 500 years. Sorry about that. I thought I had myself also organized.
That was
So
beautiful nonetheless.
thank you. Thank you for your patience. Um, well, there's got to be a few glitches, right? And I mean, I always say that it keeps me humble. So when I was writing this poem, I was thinking about this analogy of a bridge or a metaphor, and I was thinking, what kind of bridge would I be? Well, I'm sure not no 6-lane bridge or anything like that. And I was thinking maybe a swinging bridge. I started with that. And I thought, I feel kind of a little unstable. I'm not really, people are walking over me and I'm swinging. And then I decided to keep doing research on bridges, on how they're constructed. This is what we poets do, right? We dig in and research things to see if there's some more that we can get out of a metaphor. And I came upon this living root bridge. And so it's become a beautiful way to just show who I am and what I'm becoming. So instead of being this structure that's man made with all man made material, I should say, I am a weaving. And this bridge is a great way to show that. It's also very beautiful. I wish you could see it if you're someone who's just listening. You can look it up. Living Root Bridge, India.
Yeah, it's beautiful. You can see that you can see these towering trees on each side of the river, and then the roots from each side are creating this two-tiered bridge from that you can cross over. It's beautiful.
Yeah,
Love
and I
the
don't know how
metaphor.
long it takes to make them because I can't imagine it must take some time and how they train the roots to move more towards each other across this chasm, the river. It's fascinating. It's brilliant. And it's natural, which I really love. So I'm just going to skip one slide here and move to this slide. So what I'm showing you now is a black sand beach in Iceland. So I am Icelandic. And so this is somewhere that I went to in Iceland, and there's a story that goes with this, but I'll tell that a little bit later. So two of the pictures, one is the black sand beach and a lighthouse, and it's kind of dark. The skies are a bit dark. It's a beautiful, I think you can see that it's cold. It was cold and the wind was blowing to the point that when we opened our car doors, I had to be warned not to let go of the car door or it would literally get ripped off. And in the lower right-hand corner is just a close-up of stuff that was on that sandy beach. So it's kelp, dried up kelp and whatnot. The top picture is myself and a friend who's even though people are my age, they're my elder because I'm not a knowledge keeper. So she is my elder, even though I'm a bit older than her. Is Sharon Jinkerson Brass, a beloved elder, Anishinaabe elder that I've been close with. And so the picture is for us as our connection is we could be related through our indigenous ancestry, but we also have a connection through Manitoba. Her family were in the Gimli area when the Icelanders came around 1883. So I'm not good with dates, so don't quote me. You might want to look that up. So the Icelanders brought smallpox, and they pretty much wiped out her nation. So she's one of the living ancestors, relatives from that lineage. And so our connection there, when I heard that story, I was thinking, wow, what do I do? I always think of what's my responsibility. So do I have some responsibility here? Is there some kind of ceremony, some kind of amends? Is there something that I should do as an Icelandic person whose family came here around that time? I don't know if they went to Gimli, but they were coming to Canada around that time. And so I thought about that a lot. And I got my answer in the most fascinating way. Sharon had invited me to be a part of a ceremony. There was 50 matriarchs from the downtown east side that she had invited. I was one of them. And she invited us to a ceremony where we were gifted cedar umbilical cords. And with that, she talked to us about the teaching of how we used to bury our umbilical cords. and that for, of course, we had lost that teaching. So now we were being gifted a cedar umbilical cord, and young women in the downtown east side had made it for us, and it had a little red cloth like many medicines do with some other medicines in there. And that was such a powerful, powerful ceremony. And I felt so honored and privileged to be a part of it. And I really thought about the other women who were there a lot, many of whom had much more difficult lives than I've had. And mine was certainly not easy, and theirs much, much more difficult. But also, I thought about their strength and their humility. There was one there who was quite famous and well known worldwide. Um, I'm not going to say her name. I don't think she'd want that. And while she was in the circle with us and we go around to be introduced, she just says her first name. Like she doesn't go, I'm one of the 13 grandmothers. Like she never announced that part of herself. And I only knew that because Sharon had mentioned it to me before we were there. And I thought about the way that she was in the circle, just wanting to be one with everybody, not wanting to separate out herself by saying that she was this someone special. So the cedar umbilical cord teachings and that kind of teaching merged in together. And I would bring that cedar umbilical cord with me when I do readings, because I would think of readings as ceremony. I would think of how I want to show up. I want to show up in a good way. I want to show up the way these women showed up, being strong and humble at the same time. And so I had this cedar umbilical cord with me when I would go to readings. And when I went to Iceland to read, I had it with me. All the time I thought, I'm going to one day go to Winnipeg and I'm one day going to bury this cedar umbilical cord in Portage where I was born, like the tradition. But I never had, so I couldn't let go of it yet. So I kept having it. And while I was in Iceland, it occurred to me I needed to bury it there. And I could cry. I could literally cry even talking about it now. So a poet friend from there took me to this beach to do a ceremony to bury this cedar umbilical cord. This little peninsula actually points to Turtle Island. So literally I was like at this place where we're just pointing right to Turtle Island, and my Icelandic relatives went from there to Lawns to Meadows. Complicated, long story. They were had the first baby here that was not Indigenous. And then, as people know, if they know that history, it was around 1005, they didn't stay. But there's that connection between that. So the bridge between that peninsula and that body of land, between these cultures, is just so complex. I can't explain it all. But in that moment, as I buried that cedar umbilical cord, I felt whole suddenly. I felt like these two worlds that have felt so different came together. And that, in part, that was because of what I learned in Iceland. I really began to realize how similar the similarities between the Icelandic people and Indigenous teachings. Yeah, so that was a very powerful moment. And I'd like to read, if I may, a poem that I wrote while I was in Iceland. It's not about that in particular, but it's about the feeling of being on the land of your ancestors when you've never been there, and yet you feel this connection to this land and these people, and the curiosity that you have, of course, as you're going into the mall and being taken out into the country and seeing just land like you've never seen before. It's like otherworldly and so pristine. So I'll read I'm in Iceland. They have poetry in the bathroom, uncredited text on blocks of wood, cheeky commentaries on life. Some chilling reminders that those who live on shifting ground take their poetry seriously. It's Christmas here. In the mall there is red, there is wool, some shiny objects, silver adornments for trees and tabletops. I find a coffee shop where I sit. I listen to words I do not understand. They feel familiar, and I want to lean in. I do not know if my grandmother spoke these words. I do not know if I've heard this before. All I know is that I'm leaning into her, and that everywhere I go, I look for her face. I find her at a dinner party. She is pretty, and I am glad. Would she have been single too, a photographer and not a farmer with 17 children? This apartment could have been hers. The old furniture, the artwork passed down. My grandmother had nothing to give me but love and a check for $200, carefully noted in her will. The cost of diaspora long forgotten. There are no accounting methods to track what was lost, language the first to go, the passing down of heirlooms, some carved wood, filled with stories that were in the hands of the maker and now live on in the wood, a telling of another sort. My grandmother's mother came with nothing, not even a mother. Her father reluctant to claim her, listed as nanny, not daughter, listed as nanny, not sister. Her mother lost, went missing in the country where we take a drive. I look for her, but she is not there. I am here to be a witness to the past. I stand where my ancestors once stood, outdoor governing a gathering place named All Thing. Here the lands, the God, the little people honored. A short walk and there is magic waters, dark and deep. We share a coin, we make a wish. The land is filled with silence, yet never stops talking. Tells me it knows me, that I belong to its past. The pristine snow and the heat of the earth bring geyser remembrances, the gushing of watery words made hot, white hot by those who do not live brown. My skin erupts, steam escapes from my mouth. I feel the burning, the lava words of my aunties and uncles, the way they slow crawl just below my skin. I am a volcano on an island. I became my own island. I have always been between the wombs of my grandmothers, offered two worlds, one with circles where we lay ourselves open to the warmth of a fire, the other a burning of another sort. Both sides made strong by storytelling, by a connection to the land of their ancestors, each a reflection of circumstances. Black sand beaches, sharp salt, cold water, peninsulas pointing to Canada, where voyageurs from both sides ventured. Both sides made strong by storytelling, by a connection to the land of their ancestors and a place called Turtle Island.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Thank you. That was a remarkable trip for me. I'd never been to Iceland. I began to understand my ancestors more. It's very, it was healing to be there for so many reasons. And again, we're back to the writing as medicine. So I love when I can write something that expresses what I have felt in a situation and that maybe somebody else could relate to. So it's not just writing for medicine for myself, it's writing as medicine for people who read, people who wrote stories that I read when I was early in recovery, who shared their memoirs, who shared even the stories just verbally in a meeting, who shared what happened, helped me heal, helped me lose my shame, helped me understand myself, where I come from, why things are the way they are. There's just such a big, complicated world. And it feels so much less complicated right now, I'd like to tell you. I feel quite happy about that. And so there's been a big shift in my writing as a result of that, a shift I'm really enjoying. So, how would you like to hear some newer stuff?
I would
That's
love to. Yeah, yeah.
I'm writing a book right now. It's just with my substantive editor right now. It's due for publication next year, next spring, and it's a collection of poetry. This time I will have a little bit of prose, but it's poetry. And it's called, right now, if my publisher doesn't change the title, um, Save Your Prayers, Send Money. It's a little cheeky.
I love that.
I do believe in prayer, but it's really basically about aging, living with a chronic health condition, a husband who gets ill, nearly dies, and aging again, and aging together, both sort of needing a caregiver, so taking turns. It's about intergenerational trauma, which, perhaps the linkage between my health issues and my ancestors, uh, and the world I was entered. So, and then again, also there's a little bit of look at marriage as an older woman. I married my husband when I was 55, I believe. I was 50 when I met him. So it's a bit of that kind of thing, but I don't ever like to just end there. So the last chapter is called Continuum. awakening, and it's about a practice, more about the healing practices that I've done for quite a few years now and the benefits of that. So I'd like to begin, if I could, to share something with you, a poem that I wrote while COVID was going on. And I know people are like, oh, COVID poem again. I know it was kind of like we were so happy to be done with it, but then us poets had to write some poems about it, didn't we? I mean, it was a big experience in our life. And I live in a seniors building, and so it was the strangest time. My husband got COVID. He was in ICU for 8 weeks. I was told to come and say goodbye to him. And at the same time we were moving. So I was moving homes, thinking I was coming with him, and midpoint to moving here, they tell me to come and say goodbye to him. He's dying. So that was quite the experience. And, you know, I go in to say goodbye to him, and he looks at me with that little Irish twinkle in his eye, and he goes, wouldn't it be funny if I got better now that I've seen you? He hadn't been able to see me or anyone. He had been in this isolation, in a psychosis, really. He thought the Russians were coming, apparently. It's funny now, but at the time it was quite traumatic for him. So he did get better. He's still there. He's in the other room over there, but he's not gotten better. He has long COVID, and he already had some other health issues going on. So it's been quite interesting. But living here, I moved here thinking I won't have him, but I couldn't give away his clothes. Lucky, hey? Because I could have moved here and left his clothes or given them away. But I just had this feeling not to do that, even if he wasn't going to come here. I brought his clothes here. So a lot of people were dying here. The ambulance was coming constantly. It was a very different experience than other people were having around COVID. So it was an experience for all of us, but it was really in our face as people were dying and the ambulances were coming, and it was like a constant thing. So I've called this poem Witnesses, and it's got a quote from Inflamed, Deep Medicine and the Anatomy of Injustice, a great book by Rupa Mehra and Raj Patel. The body itself is a kind of place, not a solid object, but a terrain through which things pass and in which they sometimes settle and sediment. Coronavirus brought a cascading collapse, our bodies strained by a virus, we were inflamed. Even Mother Earth had a fever, there was a coordinated response, subsidies for the rich and offerings from social media miracle workers, boundary setting the new instant cure. Especially when paired with affirmations posted on mirrors, repetitions reverberating off bathroom walls, rolling off tips of tongue until they became daggers dipped in regret. Most of us were unaware that a multitude of beings share our bodies, that we live in the echoes of forever chemicals with no one holding the rim. Some suggested forest bathing. They know that the soil remembers us, that our health starts in the ground under our feet. They know that our bodies are filled with ancestral beings, that we hold trauma in the folds of our intestines, our skin the border guard. Lungs tucked away deep inside our chest, still susceptible to the fine particulate matter searing the night sky, settling disproportionately in the lungs of the poor. Some more exposed resist the return to normal, ask us to unpack the impulse to defend society, while the immunosuppressed write their wills, sign DNRs. Their exposure to smoke setting off a cascade of inflammation, an angry response to we are all in this together. Too many lived alone in the liminal space of here and not here. Our low-income seniors' housing, once vibrant, became an island of despair where we all prepared for our departure, witnessed the leaving of others. Not a happy poem. But there is beauty in there in the witnessing of each other in a way that you don't normally get to do in most communities, unless you happen to live in a nice close-knit community, which many of us do not. We live in urban settings that are quite disjointed. So we're very aware of each other here. And in many ways, that's a beautiful thing, but it's also a sad thing. I've not had so many dear people to me pass away in the last 3 years. It's just incredible. You get to know them, and you get to know their stories. So that this book will be a bit about some of that. Um, and then a bit about love. Love is a strange thing. I find it a strange thing. I haven't been really good at it. By that, I mean a romantic partner. I've been really bad at it. And with Gary, somehow I've really come to understand love in a very, very different way. So this is a poem. Shall I read another one for you? I have
Yeah,
another.
we still have a couple minutes left. So yeah.
Okay, so this is, I'll quickly read this one. Love, a misunderstanding. In search for love, and the next morning I wonder, oh, in my dreams I see love, I search for it. The next morning, wonder, would I recognize it if I sat in my living, if, I gotta start over. Let me start over. In my dreams I search for love, and the next morning wonder, would I recognize it if it sat in my living room, where we watch TV together, sometimes turn to one another and laugh. Perhaps I misunderstood, thought love hopeful, always wanting touch. Perhaps love has been living here in the air between us and all that we have shared. Time in hospitals, holding hands, faces hopeful, turned towards, a doctor announcing the end is near, when we still have so much to say to one another. In our own sorry, not sorry way, we find apology on our lips, let go of all the could haves and should haves. Love is much more forgiving in my world. Now I now understand it very differently. Um, yeah, and I think that's true of all of us. That we really need to come more to that place of giving each other room to be.
That's beautiful. Yeah, beautiful. I love your poetry so much. So, yeah, so we've got like just a couple of minutes left, but any closing thoughts or advice for writers or advice for creators and artists? Um,
Oh, that's so interesting. Trust yourself is the main thing. And if we do have a few minutes, I'd rather just read a quick poem.
yeah,
And this one is, again, that trusting yourself. This is what can happen when you trust yourself. It's called Returning. She is the washcloth, the water caressing my skin. She is the strawberry, the whipped cream melting in my mouth. She is the chant, the many voices singing. We all come from the goddess, and to her we shall return. She is returning, she is the turning, a wheel of many spokes, a wheel in the water, churning my body awake, asking me to remember she is everywhere. So giving yourself permission, I'm Indigenous. Do I have to say the creator? Is it okay for me to say goddess? Like just allowing ourselves to let come what wants to come through us. And it might be something beautiful. And there's room for it all. We don't have to be one way. We're not a monolith.
that's beautiful. What a beautiful thing to end on. Oh, well, thank you so much for being here with us today, sharing some of your words and your poetry with us. And that's the end of our time here for today on CFCR 90.5 FM in Saskatoon and Homelands. Thank you to our guest and our relative, Jonina Kirton, joining us from BC. So you can catch this episode and others on our YouTube channel. This is Auntie Andy signing off on 90.5 FM in Saskatoon. So, Ekoshi Kawapa Matina Walmina. That's all. We'll see you later.
All my relations, everyone.